Creighton University students find success through leading undergraduate, graduate, and professional programs. Nationally ranked research and internship opportunities and a global network of alumni prepare Creighton Blue Jays for lifelong success. Learn more at creighton.edu. At Creighton University, students start a successful and meaningful future. Imagine doing original research with a renowned professor or interning at a Fortune 500 company. The possibilities are endless as a Creighton Blue Jay. Learn more at creighton.edu.
Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family, talk about infertility. Today, we're going to be talking about coping with miscarriages and stillbirths. October is National Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month, and in honor of that, we're trying to bring more awareness to the concept of miscarriage and stillbirths, and in particular, how you cope with them. Such an important topic. Here's a sample of what you're going to hear.
This is very important. Whatever decisions you make today doesn't lock you in. You could change your mind tomorrow or the next day or next month. Allow yourself to feel what you feel and decide what you decide at any given moment.
This show is brought to you by Creating a Family. We are the National Infertility Education and Support nonprofit. I'm Dawn Davenport. I'm your host and the director of Creating a Family. You can find us and all of our resources online at creatingafamily.org. This show is underwritten by our corporate sponsor, Ferring Pharmaceutical, for women who have been undergoing fertility treatments and are still struggling to conceive. Daily scenarios and interactions can take their toll, that's to put it mildly, on their emotional health. There is an app out there, and you can say that about a lot of things. There's an app out there to take care of it. Well, there is an app. It's called Ferticom, and it's for your phone or for your iPad, and it was developed by reproductive psychologists Dr. Ali Domar and Dr. Elizabeth Grill. They have been guests not infrequently on this show, and they designed the app specifically to help women address the many challenging emotional life situations that arrive when you are in infertility treatment or just struggling to conceive. They do use things like cognitive behavioral and relaxation techniques, and they address more than 500 different coping options. To get more information, you can go to the website ferticomapp.com, ferticomapp.com, and we appreciate them for their support. Today, we're going to be talking about coping with miscarriage and stillbirth. We'll be talking with Lori Leo. She is the author of After Miscarriage, A Journey to Healing. We'll also be talking with Reva Judas. She is founder of NechamaComfort, a nonprofit providing crisis intervention, guidance, and support for infancy and pregnancy loss, and Ellen Krischer. She is the director of programming at NechamaComfort. Welcome, Lori, Reva, and Ellen to Creating a Family. We are so glad to have you today to talk about this topic. Before we jump in and begin, I want to lay the groundwork with some terminology, because there's a lot of terminology that is used, some of it medical, some of it in the Dr. Google, and some of it's just what we talk about when we're talking with our friends, some of the terminology is. So let's get it all straight. Excuse me. Some of the terms we'll hear are stillbirth, miscarriage, spontaneous abortion, pregnancy loss, fetal demise. So both stillbirth and miscarriage are types of pregnancy loss or fetal demise. Both pregnancy loss and fetal demise are kind of the general terms that are used. But they differ on when the loss occurs. A miscarriage, which is sometimes called almost exclusively by the medical professionals, spontaneous abortion. A miscarriage is when the baby dies before the 20th week of pregnancy, and a stillbirth is the death of the baby after the 20th week of pregnancy, but before delivery, usually. All right, so let's now talk about how common they are. Lori, can you start us off by how common are miscarriages? And I guess I don't know if there's statistics worldwide, but anyway, give us at least the U.S. stats.
Sure. The U.S. statistics are about 1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriage.
And is that recognized pregnancies? Because a lot of times women are not even aware they're pregnant, and they or maybe a few days late, and they have a slightly heavier period. Do you know if that stat includes recognized pregnancies, or is it just all pregnancies?
No, I believe that is all pregnancies.
Okay. All right. And Ellen, can you talk to us about stillbirths? How common are stillbirths?
So there's about 26,000 stillbirths per year in the United States. It's quite a large number.
Yeah, it is. And do you happen to know if most stillbirths occur before labor or during labor, and when a birth is impending?
No, that's pretty much before labor. That's before the term has come. It's identified that the fetus is no longer alive.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And we're not going to be talking today about the causes of pregnancy and stillbirth, or the latest treatments for those people who have experienced these tragedies. I will say that Creating a Family has extensive resources on both of those topics, and you can find that by going to our website, creatingafamily.org, and hovering over infertility, click on A to Z resources, and then go to miscarriage. And you will get all of our resources. We have a lot of resources dealing with the causes and treatment for both miscarriage and stillbirth. All right. Lori, can you tell us your experience with miscarriage? What led you to write your book that's After Miscarriage, A Journey to Healing? What led you to write the book, and what's been your experience?
Well, when I was experiencing the miscarriages, I had 4 in less than 2 years. I desperately searched for a book that I could read and that I would have a shared experience, so I could relate to someone who felt like I did at that time. In fact, I, at 36, did not know one person who had ever had a miscarriage, which leads us to the topic we're discussing today. Nobody talks about it. So imagine at 36, I didn't know that, and I was determined when I got through this and, quote, healed, that I would write a book so that someone could just pick up something and say, yes, I felt the same way too. I'm feeling like that right now. And so that was the reason why I did that.
And Reva, you were one of the founders of NechamaComfort. So what led you to found this organization, which is a support organization for people going through this?
So it's interesting, just want to make one comment. When you talk about all the terminology, over the years, we've learned to refer to early miscarriage, termination, stillbirth, and we refer to the couple as their child, their baby, because really at conception, it's their child, and even the thought of the conception is their child. So 31 years ago, our firstborn son lived for 12 hours. He passed away of a congenital heart defect. And I, too, had no support anywhere. There were no books. We didn't talk about it, just like we didn't talk about any crisis situation at that time. And then I also had 6 miscarriages within 10 years. And like Lori, there was no place to turn to. There was no computers at the time to Google, so even going to the library, the bookstore, looking for books. And I realized that support was needed, and that we didn't talk about it, and that once we started talking about it, we were support for each other. It was interesting. In the early years, people would call me on the phone. We would discuss their loss, be it the stillbirth or the miscarriage. And when we hung up, they said, if you see me in the supermarket, don't acknowledge that we had this conversation. So it was sort of a catch-22. It was not out in public, and we were not given a permission, so to say, to speak about it. And that was one of the reasons in 2008 we founded this organization, at first for women, but quickly knew that we needed to be a support for the women, the men, grandparents, extended family, other children, siblings, and we do community education as well.
You raised such a good point about although you were talking over 30 years ago, I'm not sure it's changed a lot. I still think our society has such discomfort talking about miscarriage and stillbirth. I actually think it's probably more, discomfort on talking about both. Ellen, why do you think, why are we as a society so reticent to acknowledge that either we've had a miscarriage? I think stillbirth's a little different. I think people are more open about acknowledging a stillbirth, if only because at that point everyone knows that they're pregnant. But what is it about this type of loss that makes us hesitant to discuss it?
It feels like a very private thing in the early stages of pregnancy. It's been the custom up until very, very recently with early sonograms and publishing them on Facebook, for example, and reveal parties and that sort of thing. It was the custom not to even speak about your pregnancy until you were at least 12 weeks. And so miscarriages, which often happen before that first trimester is up, it was sort of it was uncomfortable to go to someone and say, by the way, I was pregnant, by the way, I had a miscarriage. Especially with the mourning and the sadness often turns people internally anyway. And that just fostered this whole experience where now you're sad, there's no good reason for it, you can't explain it to people, and as time goes by, you feel even stranger saying, oh, by the way, the reason that I was really depressed last month is because my baby died. That's a very, very hard thing for people to say.
It was a great segue into another question I wanted to ask, and that is, I think you were spot on when you say that people are sharing their pregnancies earlier and earlier, and I think you're right. I think partly it's because of the advent of sonograms and things like that. And how has that, and Lori, I'm coming back to you, how has that affected people's willingness to talk about a miscarriage if they've already, at 10 weeks, shared a sonogram picture?
I don't think that people are still willing to discuss it, and this happened just recently when people have seen my book, people I know. I openly share because that's the only way that we can help each other. Because when I openly share, people start, well, that was me, but it's a whisper. It's a whisper, well, me too, and then they start to open up. I think it's difficult for people to still share early. I think for me, I know that the feelings of failure come in as women. We reproduce, and there are a lot of emotions that creep in, and people, I believe women don't talk about it a lot because there's a sense of failure as well.
And I think you're right. I also wonder if it's because people, they don't know. When you share, especially if it's an early miscarriage, and we're going to talk a little about the distinctions between when a fetal loss or a pregnancy loss occurs. But if it's an early loss, people's temptation is so often. In fact, we did it was kind of a poll on our, we have a large online support group, a Facebook group, and everybody out there, we'd love to have you join us, facebook.com/group/creating a family. And the most common responses, people immediately, it was if they dismissed the pain and said, well, you can always try again. Or, their real comment, something was wrong with the baby. You didn't want, that baby would have turned out to have all these problems. So it's whatever. If they're religious, it's God's way of taking care of it. And it's and that the people are left to feel as if they haven't suffered a loss, that they should be thankful that this has happened. And I think that because of that, people are really hesitant to share. I don't. Maybe that is changing somewhat. I'm not seeing it. Reva, are you?
I am seeing a change for the next generation, which I'm glad to see. There's definitely been an improvement. I think it's important for whoever is involved, like you with this wonderful show and books, that we keep mentioning and we keep talking about it. And the more that we make it okay to talk about, people will. Also, social media. There's not, a week that goes by I feel that somebody in the spotlight a couple weeks ago was Carrie Underwood. She came out with her miscarriages. People are talking about it, and they're sort of making it okay. And I see working with the next generation, women in their 20s, who are comfortable about talking about pregnancies, are comfortable, they, like Ellen had said, that we tell the gender of the baby as early as 12 weeks, as soon as we find out about it. We share the news. When we give our education programs to the young generation, and I tell them stories about how you weren't allowed to say the word pregnant on TV years ago, and things like that, or superstitions. If you do this, if you don't do this, don't talk about these things, and they don't accept that. I think that the generation is used to dealing with crises, dealing with things as it happens in our world, unfortunately, but has made them more comfortable with discussing their losses and their babies and their miscarriages, and also because they do know they're pregnant. You had said earlier, years ago, it was sort of like in this period, especially on the fertility journey, where you're so tuned into dates and numbers and cycles that we're sharing it, and that it's so important to educate the community at large of what to say. You had mentioned, you're young, it's God's will, or you have other children, or you can get pregnant. And we sort of need to educate the communities to say, you can't, if you don't know what to say, just say, I'm sorry for your loss at any situation. And we try to encourage the couples that they need to feel and have the choices to be comfortable to speak. But I am happy to say that I think over the last 5 or 6 years, there is a change in the society and in the couples being able to express their grief.
Yeah, I will say that almost universally, I know, Laura, you were saying that at 36 you had not known anyone who had a miscarriage, but almost universally we hear from people that when they do open up, it's like so many people they know have had a miscarriage, and so many people are, that happened to me too, and oftentimes the people you are speaking with, it's one of the few times they've talked about it, and so it's a cathartic experience sometimes to be open. Ellen, what are some reasons why people are not wanting to? I know we just said Reva is hearing more and more people who are talking about it. What are some reasons that you see why people are hesitant to talk about it?
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned is a big factor, the guilt. I must have done something wrong if I wasn't able to bring a happy baby into the world. That's definitely a factor. Certainly in the case of infertility treatments, the sadness and the grief is so bound up in the entire traumatic experience of going through fertility treatment. And this, sometimes the focus is, okay, this cycle didn't work, let's move on, without necessarily giving yourselves the time to acknowledge what has happened. And also, I think the education piece for communities, so that people don't feel that if they do share, they're going to be barraged with either advice or comments that are meant to be helpful. People don't mean to be. They're not trying to be mean. They're trying to be helpful, but it turns out that a lot of the things that we typically say, there was something wrong with the baby, you could try again, are not really helpful things because they don't really acknowledge the loss. So you're afraid to say anything, and you're afraid that if you do say something, the stuff you're going to get back is going to make it worse or be not helpful, and those are real barriers.
You are so right. I mean, I really think that is a barrier. And then the hard part is it's you're still suffering, but nobody else is perceiving it as a loss. And so you're the one, you're having this pain and grief, but it's not recognized by our society. Although I think that somewhat depends on when in the pregnancy. But so you're left alone with your grief, which makes it all the worse, it feels like. Do you see that, Ellen, as well, in the people that you work with through NechamaComfort?
Yeah, definitely, and it's also in general, even in losses. If someone loses a parent or a family member, the expectation is that we're going to move on quickly, and people who are not experiencing the loss don't realize how long the grief process really takes, and so 2-3 months down the line, which is really short in terms of the suffering of pregnancy loss. Other people are way beyond it. They're like, "What do you mean? What do you mean you're still sad? What do you mean you're still grieving?" Grief is a long time thing. There are definitely steps forward along the way, but it does take a long time, and that's another piece of education that we can do for the community at large.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just pause for a moment. I was so thankful that you brought up the discussion of how miscarriage is different, or the special impact, I guess I would say, of miscarriage on those who are in fertility treatment. I am not saying it's worse necessarily, but I will say that for those who are in treatment, they have been trying for a very long time for this pregnancy. They have no assurance that they're going to be able to get pregnant again, and they have spent a lot of money to get to this point. And it is not a financial thing. On the other hand, finances matter, and for some people, the ability to even try again is in question because they may not have the money to go through another cycle, or might not have any other frozen embryos. So I think that there is a special pain for those who experience a miscarriage after fertility treatment. Let me pause for a moment to remind you that you are listening to Creating a Family, and we are talking about coping with miscarriage and stillbirth. This show, as well as all the resources provided by Creating a Family, could not and would not happen without the generous support of our partners. These are organizations who believe in our mission of bringing you unbiased, medically accurate information, and one of our partners is Schraf's 2.0. They are a specialty fertility pharmacy that believes pharmacy care can and should be remarkable. All of their employees, and they do mean all of them, I mean literally, from the pharmacist, which you would expect, but all the way down to their shipping clerk, understand and have been trained in the stress of fertility treatment, and they know how to deal with customers with dignity, empathy, and respect. Coming back, I think it is, I wanted to talk about the differences in how people experience loss, and some people there may be no difference as to when in the pregnancy, but is there a difference in when in the pregnancy you lose the baby? If you lose the baby, a week after you find out you're pregnant, so let's say you lose the baby at 4 weeks pregnancy, versus losing the baby at 12 weeks, versus a stillbirth where you're losing the baby at 28 weeks. Is there a difference in how people experience that loss? Reva, let me ask that question to you.
So that's the question we get a lot from families who are going through the grief process. And what we've seen is that there is a difference. But it also depends on the family dynamics and the personalities of the couple experiencing the loss. When we run our support groups, we run them from early miscarriage to the age of 1. And that's one group. And when I was trained through the Resolve Through Share program in Wisconsin, that was one of the things that they opened my eyes to, that the planning and the attachment to the baby most of the time occurs before the pregnancy has even occurred. When you get married or when you find your life partner and you want to start discussing about when, if, how, why we're going to raise a family, that already happened years before the pregnancy actually occurred. And we live in a society where raising children are the norm, which we find out is not always so easy to achieve that norm. So I think that what's important is to understand that for these couples, there is a loss and a grief when they're told the news that there's no longer a baby. And it could be 4 weeks or it could be a stillbirth. And I think we need to recognize, to allow this couple to grieve if they want. One of our goals is to give the couple and their family and friends and community the choices. There's no formula, so to say, if this happens at this stage, this is how I'm going to feel. A lot of information and dynamics come into their feelings, but it's important to recognize that grief is not linear, and they may appear fine at first, but for whatever reason, if they were, if it was early on in the pregnancy, milestones may trigger it again. Their due date, finding out they're pregnant and their friends are pregnant with them, their friend's delivery. A year later, they'll never forget. I know exactly the dates, the season, what was happening in the news when I had my miscarriages. And I think it's really important to allow the couple to feel they want to feel. And that we shouldn't assume, and it could be that the couple, for whatever that reason is, they're not dwelling on the loss and the grief. But I always tell them, the couple, when the miscarriage is occurring, to give yourself a couple days off. It's not, and we try to teach the doctors too. It's not like just having a medical procedure. There are emotions tied to it, and that it's okay to feel a loss. And we always say to the couple, we're not going to move past it, but each loss we're going to, on an individual basis, deal with that loss of a child, put it into your life, and to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Lori, when you were researching your book, what did you find about the differences about when in the pregnancy the loss occurs?
When in the pregnancy the loss occurs, it's
how people cope is what I meant. I'm sorry, that wasn't a particularly articulate question, was it?
Okay, that's okay. So how people cope.
Yeah, what did you find?
Well, it's that's, again, I agree. It's very individual. I personally, speaking from experience, the losses were the same for me, whether I lost the baby at 6 weeks or I lost the baby at 8.5 weeks or I lost the baby at 11.5 weeks. For me, the feelings were the same because, as we heard earlier, that you have created a life for this child. And of course, yes, before you even maybe found your partner, you've created this life. I created a life for the child. I had dreams and hopes. So my grief, it didn't really change from 4 weeks to 11 weeks. The grief was the same. And I think you'll find statistically that a lot of people will share that same feeling as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, yeah, and I loved what Reva said, is that the attachment is when you are first thinking about creating this baby, and so you become attached and you start your dreaming at that point. So the pain is there because the loss is there. We did get a question. It's actually not a question. It's more of a statement, but I'm going to read it anyway, from Bethany. She said, I have experienced 2 first-term trimester miscarriages. Let me read that. I have experienced 2 first trimester miscarriages. I don't want to try again. I'm afraid to try again. I'm not even sure what my next steps should be. Ellen, this is not really a question, but I'm going to say let's use it as a jumping off point. If you were talking with somebody who is she has not mentioned how long ago these her miscarriages occurred, but she doesn't know her next step. She doesn't even know if she wants to try again. Any thoughts on what you might say to somebody like Bethany?
The first thing I would do is say, I'm really sorry. This is really a terrible thing that happened to you. And then I would suggest that the number one thing that she has to do is take care of her, and I don't recall if you said she has a husband or a partner, but take care of her and her partner. That's the number one thing, to make sure that she's physically okay, that she's managing okay, that she has the support that she needs. For some people, getting out of bed in the morning and getting dressed is a huge victory. For other people, they're able to do that right away. It really is very individual. When sort of the normal everyday annoyances of life start bothering you, that's when you can tell that you're sort of back to yourself. So that's the first thing. Whatever she needs to do for herself, whatever support she needs to rally around herself. And then there will come a point where she feels that she, in conjunction with her partner, are able to make a choice about how they want to move forward. And certainly in the case of repeated miscarriages, I would counsel consulting with medical professionals who have experience with multiple miscarriages. There could be very simple reasons. There could be more complicated reasons, but that's always something we would recommend if they haven't done that already. And that's how people have to proceed, a step at a time. And this is very important. Whatever decisions you make today doesn't lock you in. You could change your mind tomorrow or the next day or next month. Allow yourself to feel what you feel and decide what you decide at any given moment.
That is such good advice. You don't have to decide. Whatever you decide today is not necessarily, you have permission to change. It makes it easier to make a decision when you don't feel like you're totally bound into whatever it is that you have decided. What do you recommend at NechamaComfort? And I guess let me ask you this, Ellen, since you just spoke, I'll ask you this as well. As far as how to seek closure, and what I'm specifically trying to get at is advantages and or disadvantages of providing a ceremony surrounding the loss. And for some people, they want to do a funeral or something like a funeral. Help us think through, from the standpoint of someone who is experiencing this, what are some of the things they should consider in deciding how best to memorialize this loss?
We definitely encourage people to memorialize the loss in a way that makes sense for them. I think Reva mentioned the word choices, and that's really, really key. In a Jewish environment, some people do something that's like a shiva, which is a formalized time when family and friends can come and gather and offer support to the couple. Other people decide to have other kinds of gatherings. Some people do things very, very privately. They plant something in their garden. They plant a tree that flowers at that same time every year. We've had people who like to light candles in their home, so they bought a special candlestick or certain aromatic candles. Some people get, especially if they have other children and they have jewelry with charms or names, they might select a charm to represent that child. It's very individual, and it's what the couple feels makes sense for them. And it's, again, not something that has to be decided in the days after it happens. This could be at any time.
What if the miscarriage happens early and you don't have anything that there's nothing, the fetal remains are not something that you have? Any thoughts on, and Lori, I'm going to turn to you, any thoughts on how to memorialize that in that scenario?
Well, I don't think that changes whether you have, the fetus or not. I mean, the emotions are still the same. What you would do to memorialize that child is really still the same. And again, it's a private decision. It's a personal choice. Some people will send balloons, pink and white balloons up in the air. So it really depends on what is close to your heart. Just like grieving, whatever makes the couple feel more comfortable memorializing their child, it's whatever ceremonially they would like to do together. And again, it all is a personal choice. It all comes down to the comfort level of the couple.
I'll throw out another example that I know of a number of people who have gotten tattoos that represent their miscarriage. And one in particular was a tattoo that it was a tree, a barren tree, and then she put, for each, she had many miscarriages, and for each miscarriage it was a leaf, the outline of a leaf. And that was her way to bring constant reminder this loss, and it was very helpful. So, various types of tattoos, I think, can be, if you're into ink, that's something to consider as well.
There's another something that we suggest for families is that they name the baby, regardless of what stage of development, that they choose a name, and that way they can refer to the baby as by that name rather than always saying the baby, and that way it gives a concreteness to their experience.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to ask about that, the naming or the not naming. And one of the things that has come up is that the name that the parents have, and we didn't receive a question on this, but I have seen this discussed, so I will ask it as if it were a question. And that is, if they had picked out a name, but it was a family name, or a name after a father or a junior or whatever, that they didn't want to use that name because they might want to use that for a living child, but feeling disloyal if they change and then change and use a different name for the baby that died. Any thoughts on that? And Reva, let me ask you that question, and then Ellen, you chime in right afterwards.
So yes, that happened to me exactly. When my firstborn son, we were going to name after my grandfather, who had passed away, and we didn't. We were advised, you may use that new name again. But over the years, what I find again, going back to choices, people will tend not to use the name that they had planned for a variety of reasons, and they may never use that name again, though. So what I see happen is, let's say they were naming it after somebody's father. Father's name was John. In their hearts and their minds, even though they may have named their infant that passed away a different name, in their minds, that's what their name is. And we try to tell the couple the choice that the stigma, the pressure of the grandparents, let's say, you have to have a name after a certain family member, or you want to name it a junior name, that sometimes life does not take the path that we thought it was going to take. And that's the whole thing, why what makes this loss, miscarriage, stillbirth, unique, because it's a family. So I think what's important is that the couple should, like Ellen said, instead of referring it to as the baby, should name it something that's meaningful to the family. And we also work with them. We give the couple choices. And again, it's not that it has to be done immediately. There's nothing that has to be, legally written on a birth certificate or a death certificate. And if you want to put up a stone or a memorial or a piece of jewelry, that could be anything that the couple chooses. I remember there was a couple who, in utero, they were expecting twin girls. As nicknames, they named them Daisy and Sunflower. And what happened was, after they lost the babies, they decided to paint two beautiful rocks as their headstones with daisies and sunflowers on it. So it's really it's choices, but to allow the couple to have those choices of what they should name the baby. And again, there is no wrong or right.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. One of the things that's come up a couple of times in our discussion so far, and Reva, you just mentioned something about grandparents, and I think that is something that is not talked about much, and that is the grief of extended family members who have also formed an attachment in their minds. Lori, thoughts on that, on how other members of our family suffer, even though they're not the ones who went through the miscarriage?
Oh, absolutely. They suffer. Your friends suffer. Your siblings suffer. Your parents suffer. Obviously your husband suffers. Your wife suffers. Your partner suffers. And of course, my day was when we everything was kept inside. So sometimes you don't hear them vocalize it as often. but you see the pain. So when we think about dealing with the woman who has experienced a miscarriage and her grief and pain, we also absolutely have to consider everybody involved in this grief, because also the grandparents had hopes of a grandchild. Also, the sister had a hope of being an aunt. And it goes on from there. So we do have to certainly include them in the situation. And one thing I'd like to just mention, that we really need to also help these families through these difficult situations, because so many of them do suffer. And one thing that I feel is very important is for counseling, and to include the couple and as many other family members that need to be involved in the process. It's very helpful to get not only the couple but also the families through this difficult time.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned counseling. We're going to circle back to that, but before we do, Ellen, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that I, when reading the NechamaComfort website, you're real clear that you're open for not only the woman but for the husband and for extended family members, and I love that. And I wanted to talk with you specifically about husbands, or partners, male partners. Or the non-pregnant partner, let's just say it that way. Oftentimes that person doesn't feel like, and often it's a he, doesn't feel like that he has the right to grief because he wasn't pregnant. Do you see that, and what are specific things you can do to help the partner be able to verbalize and work through and own the loss?
So absolutely, the partners often feel that like they need to be the supportive person, even though they're grieving, and even though it's a terrible loss for them as well. And to a certain extent, that is true, because the person who was pregnant does have certain physical consequences, but the grief is still there for the partners. It's very important when dealing with a partner situation to remember two things. First of all, every single person grieves differently. So you might have a stereotype that the male is going to be, sort of quieter and not talk about it, not want to talk about it, and the female is going to want to. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not. The other thing that's very important to remember is when we have a loss of someone in our family, there's a primary griever, and the partner is sort of the support. Yes, that might be an in-law to them, but it's still they're the supportive person. It isn't as tangible a loss for them. And so what that means is, in this case of a child loss, both people are grieving, and they're grieving differently, which creates tremendous tension often between the couple, because they might not be on the same page today or tomorrow or the next day. Somebody might be feeling it one day while the other person is having a day where they're sort of getting back to life, and that's a very difficult dynamic. It's a tremendous stress on marriages and any kind of partner situation. One of the things that we advise communities when we do community awareness is for friends of the partner to be extra special careful to ask about that person and not the wife or not the person who had the loss. So if you have a friend that you go to work with every day, ask, how you doing? How are things today? I'm sorry. All the things that you might say to the woman who delivered, say that to the partner as well, and make sure you're always asking about how the partner feels, and be as much of a good friend as you can, and also be aware of the stress that they might be having, not only from the loss but because of the stress on the marriage.
Yeah, I think such a good point. And now to circle back to what Lori mentioned before. I mean, one of the things that people who experience miscarriage are often subtly, if not just specifically told this, there is subtle pressure to get over it. Okay, try again. Now, you've got it next month. As soon as the doctor says you can try again. Get over it. It's time now. If 2 months later, you don't want, or 3 months later, or 6 months later, you don't want to go to a baby shower. There's the unspoken kind of sigh of, okay, they need to be getting on with life. They're carrying this too far. So let's talk a little about how long the grief process takes. And we've already talked about it being unique. And in addition to how long it takes, when should we be concerned for somebody who is, in our minds, needing to be getting over it? Lori, let me address that initially to you, and then I'm going to come back to the others because I want to hear everybody's thoughts on this.
No, I mean, the grief can, take a lifetime. That doesn't mean that you are, in bed for 20, 30 years, right? But the grief has many different stages. You feel isolated, very withdrawn, and those are normal feelings that can go on for quite some time. And I think back to the woman who just made the statement of just being afraid, and how long does that process take? And that's why as we go back and think about getting help. But grief, yes. I mean, I can say that 15 years later, grief pops back up for me. There's no question about it, and we can't identify when that can occur. Is it grief that paralyzes me? No, not anymore. Did it in the beginning? No question about that, and everybody is individual. So grief can crop back up 20 years later. You can find yourself looking at a pregnant person and break down in tears. 20 years later, yes, you can. And we have to be kind to ourselves and understand and accept those feelings, that they are real, and it is still okay many, many years later
to be experiencing this. Reva, thoughts
Yes.
on that of when we need to, when we need to worry about someone? What are some signs that tell us that this person may need to be getting some help? Because I don't think everybody that experiences a miscarriage needs to be, I think they all need to be supported, but they may not all need therapy. Although I think we could all benefit from therapy, but when should we be concerned, and when should we, as the support person for somebody who has suffered a loss of miscarriage or stillbirth, should we be encouraging extra help?
So I think that we have to, exactly what Lori said, grief, it's not linear. That theory went out a long time ago. And I think your family, your friends. That's why, when we work with a couple, we sort of look like who's the most sane person in this dynamics. It shouldn't be the husband and wife of each other, because they need sort of either another relative, another friend, a clergy member, the doctor. We've spoken to many OBs around the country as well, that one of the things that's been suggested is a person that has gone through a loss of a baby should not wait for 6 weeks to have a checkup. They should be calling them in 3 to 4 weeks, not just for their physical well-being, but to check on their emotional well-being as well. As Ellen said, if they're getting out of bed in the morning, after a few weeks, give them time, and they're getting dressed and they're taking a shower, that's okay. If you see that they're really not participating in quote-unquote normal, average things to do during the day, they're not eating, they're not functioning independently as an adult, then that's a sign that there could be something more going on. Also, women, your body doesn't know that you lost the baby, so your body is still reacting with hormones, with maybe postpartum depression. So that's why it's important to have the medical staff and people close to them to be aware and to check in on what's happening. You're right, not everybody needs the same type of therapy, counseling. We do encourage couples at any stage to talk about it at least one time with a professional. That could be a doctor, that could be a therapist. Many hospitals have bereavement departments that they can talk to. And it's sort of through a conversation we are able to get with our trained facilitators to get a sense of how the couple is doing. But to know that it's okay. My son was born on Passover, which is a very big holiday, and he died on Passover, and we named him Pesach, which is the Hebrew word of Passover. So either, 31 years later, when they start to put the matzahs in the supermarket, I get panic attacks. Not a major panic attack, but that day I'm very solemn, and I recognize that, and the people around me recognize it, and that's okay. But if I wasn't able to get through it after a time, then we would be concerned. But to give people, it takes time to grieve and just to get a sense to see how the person is. And it's never wrong to suggest to someone, do they want to go to talk to somebody? Not necessarily saying counseling or therapy, just to talk to somebody. And many times we'll get calls 3 months after the loss, because that's sort of when everybody has stopped checking in and the people want to have an extra comfort.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ellen, as far as how long to wait before you try to get pregnant again, now, from a medical standpoint, we want people to go to their doctor, and the doctor is going to be advising them. So I'm not really talking about from a medical standpoint of when you should begin again. I'm talking more from the emotional. What are some signs that someone can look internally and say, okay, now I'm probably healing enough from the emotions that I can begin again? Because some people have I've seen people want to the very next month start again, and others who it takes years before they want to go again, try again to get pregnant. So thoughts on that, Ellen?
Sure, absolutely. I would say the main guideline is if the couple feels that they're on the same page about wanting to try. That's really aside from medical, that's really the single criteria. My husband and I had a stillbirth at 37 weeks, and we both knew that as soon as the doctor cleared us that we were going to try right again. Other people who we spoke to decided that they were done. They weren't going to have. They were happy with their family, and they weren't going to try again. That's the decision that they made. And the important thing is that we made it together. You were talking just a moment ago about when's a good sign of how do you know when you might need to see someone to seek some counseling. If an extended period of time goes by where the husband and wife are not on the same page and they're having a lot of difficulty about that, that's another time that they might choose to go and say, okay, we need somebody to help us work through this, work through the issues so that we can proceed together as a couple.
Yeah, good advice on being on the same page. Yeah, I think that's great. Lori, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think it's true. I guess I go back to any type of support. I think it's important as you go through this process that it's very helpful to seek that support either from family members or professionally to understand what the long-term goal is in creating a family, whether you try again in 2 months, again being on the same page as we heard from both Reva and Ellen, or looking at other options. But I think that's definitely something that couples should explore either themselves as a couple or individually, so they can look at ways to have a family, and whether, again, that's trying in a month or two or looking at other options.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, it's okay to say, I don't want to go through this loss again, or I don't trust that my body will be able to carry a baby, and to say that there are other ways I need to explore, whether my desire is to give birth or whether my desire is to parent, and whether if my desire is to parent, what are some other options I have. So I think that's a very good point that it can look different for everyone. All right, and I want to end now on a very practical level. If you have someone in your life who has experienced a miscarriage or a stillbirth, how are some ways that you can comfort and offer hope, or not even offering hope, what are some ways that you can support that person from a very practical standpoint? Ellen, let me start with you.
So be a friend, or even if you're a family member, be a friend. Act the way a good friend would act. If they need help with household chores or errands, if there are other children in the family, you can be helpful with those. Any way that you can be a good friend, that's what they need the most. And don't give them advice. They really don't unless they ask for it. If they ask for advice, certainly be helpful, but try not to offer too much advice because they're probably getting enough and they probably aren't ready for it. That's what I would suggest. And just, if you're in a position, give them a hug. That goes a long way.
Okay. Ellen, Reva, any additional thoughts in addition to being a good friend and doing things that good friends do and not to give advice? Any other thoughts for the friends and family of someone going through this loss?
I think it's to recognize the loss, to just say the simple words, I'm sorry, and, sometimes less is more, to understand that you're not going to make it better. There's no way just to tie this up in a box and then tie a bow around it, to say I'm here for you. Not somebody open, and not what do you need, but instead of saying I'm going to bring you dinner Tuesday night, and if they don't want to, and understand silence. We're very hard. Silence is very hard for us to do as a whole in the world. We speak. We're texting. I'm a people person. I like to talk to people one-on-one. But the creation of something like this today, which 30 years ago I never thought would be possible, with your radio show and getting out to so many people, is wonderful. But just a text saying, I heard what happened. I'm here for you. I'm going to the store. Can I pick up milk for you? You don't even have to talk to me. I'll leave the groceries at the door and ring the bell. Over the years, the people have reached out to us and have said to us they never got upset if somebody contacted them too much, but they were upset when friends and family members didn't acknowledge the loss. And we tell the family and friends, if they get upset, if they get jealous, it's not of you if you're pregnant or if they lash out at you. They're grieving the loss of their baby. And just a text, phone call, I care, I'm here, and we're so sorry.
One of our staff members who went through a miscarriage said that the kindest thing anyone did was some good friends who just showed up with some pizza one night shortly after the miscarriage. And they said, we can come in or we won't come in, but here's some pizza. And their friends did come in, and they had pizza with them. And she said just their presence. And I think you're right. That was in part because they were acknowledging. Lori, last word. What would be some specific advice on how to comfort somebody who is going through a loss of a miscarriage or a stillbirth?
Well, sometimes it's, for me, and I have to always speak from personal experience. I had a dear friend, and what we would do, and she was wonderful, we would go a few times a week, and we would go horseback riding. So it was something where I found an outlet and a joy. So if I could speak to the women out there who just can't find joy, I would suggest, this is not comforting right now, but I would suggest to find something that you love to do or wanted to do so you can just bring some joy back into your heart, because there's so much sadness. But if you can just bring a little teardrop of joy back in there, it will make a bit of a difference in your journey.
Oh, what a perfect note to end on. Find joy. Find something that will give you joy. And you may have to look a while because you're in pain. But it's okay to do something for yourself that brings you joy. And not only is it okay, but it's a blessing. What a beautiful sentiment to end on. Let me remind people that this show and all of our resources would not happen without the generous support of our partners. Here's another wonderful partner, Reproductive Medicine Associates of New York. They are one of the largest fertility practices in the state of New York, and actually one of the biggest in the country. By combining the latest innovations in reproductive science with compassionate and customized treatment plans, RMA of New York is able to provide the best possible care. Thank you so much for being with us today to talk about the topics of miscarriage, pregnancy loss, stillbirth, whatever we want to call it. Lori Leo, author of After Miscarriage, A Journey to Healing, Reva Judas, and Ellen Krischer with the support group NechamaComfort. If you would like more information or to buy Lori's book, you can do it at her, well, you can do it. Any independent bookseller would have it, any good one does, and if not, of course, it's on Amazon. Or you can go to her website, LoriLeoAuthor.com. To get more information about NechamaComfort, you can go to their website, which is NechamaComfort.com. That's NechamaComfort. It's funny, I was all of a sudden struggling to spell it, the word comfort, which is not the hard part there. But you can go to that website. They have a lot of resources there for families. So it's NechamaComfort, then the word comfort.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you next week.
Right now at the Home Depot, you'll save up to 35% off appliance special buys, like a GE Appliances top-load washer and dryer pair, with deep clean and deep rinse options, a reliable heavy-duty agitator, and 4 precise water levels, just $4.78 each. Wash, dry, save, repeat. Today is the day for doing, with Spring Black Friday savings now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only while supplies last. Gas Dryer Extra. See store for details. Valid through April 17th. Right now at the Home Depot, you'll save up to 35% off appliance special buys, like a GE Appliances top-load washer and dryer pair, with deep clean and deep rinse options, a reliable heavy-duty agitator, and 4 precise water levels, just $4.78 each. Wash, dry, save, repeat. Today is the day for doing, with Spring Black Friday savings now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only while supplies last. Gas Dryer Extra. See store for details. Valid through April 17th.